Hey guys, Lord Naren White here, the Holy Ghost, the one true God, back with you with the next video in my series reading Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens. Without further ado, returning to Oliver Twist as read by Lord Naren White. No, no, sir, sobbed Oliver, clinging to the hand which held the well-known cane. No, no, sir. I will be good indeed. Indeed, indeed I will, sir. I am a very little boy, sir, and it is so. So what? Inquired Mr. Bumble in amazement. So lonely, sir. So very lonely, cried the child. Everybody hates me. Oh, sir, don't, pray be cross to me. The child beat his hand upon his heart and looked in his companion's face with tears of real agony. Mr. Bumble regarded Oliver's piteous and helpless look with some astonishment for a few seconds, hemmed 3 or 4 times in a husky manner, and, after muttering something about that troublesome cough, bade Oliver dry his eyes and be a good boy. Then, once more taking his hand, he walked on him with silence. The undertaker, who had just put up the shutters of his shop, was making some entries in his day book by the light of a most appropriate dismal candle, when Mr. Bumble entered. "Aha!" said the undertaker, looking up from the book, and pausing in the middle of a word. "Is that you, Bumble?" "No one else, Mr. Sowerberry," replied the beadle. "Here, I've brought the boy." Oliver made a bow. "Oh, that's the boy, is it?" said undertaker, raising the candle above his head to get a better view of Oliver. Mrs. Sowerberry, will you have the goodness to come here a moment, my dear?" Mrs. Sowerberry emerged from a little room behind the shop and presented the form of a short, thin, squeezed-up woman with a vixenish countenance. "My dear," said Mr. Sowerberry, "this is the boy from the workhouse that I told you of." Oliver bowed again. "Dear me," said the undertaker's wife, "he's very small." "Why, he is rather small," replied Mr. Bumble, looking at Oliver as if it were his fault that he was no bigger. "He is small, there's no denying it. But he'll grow, Mrs. Sowerberry, he'll grow." "I dare say he will," replied the lady pettishly. "On our victuals and our drink, I see no saving in perished children, not I, for they always cost more to keep than they're worth. However, men always think they know best. There, get downstairs, little bag of bones." With this, the undertaker's wife opened a side door and pushed Oliver down a steep flight of stairs into a stone cell, damp and dark, forming the ante-room to the coal cellar and denominated kitchens, where sat a slatternly girl in shoes down at heel and blue worsted stockings very much out of repair. "Here, Charlotte," said Mr. Sowerberry. Who had followed Oliver down. "Give this boy some of the cold bits that were put by for Trip. He hasn't come home since the morning, so he may go without 'em. I dare say the boy isn't too dainty to eat 'em, are you, boy?" Oliver, whose eyes had glistened at the mention of meat, and who was trembling with eagerness to devour it, replied in the negative, and a plateful of coarse broken victuals was set before him. "I wish some well-fed philosopher, whose meat and drink turn to gall within him, whose blood is ice, whose heart is iron, could have seen Oliver Twist clutching at the dainty viands that the dog had neglected. I wish he could have witnessed the horrible avidity with which Oliver tore the bits asunder, with all the ferocity of famine. There is only one thing I should like better, and that would be to see the philosopher making the same sort of meal himself, with the same relish. Well, said the undertaker's wife, when Oliver had finished his supper, which she had sat regarded in silent horror, and with fearful auguries of his future appetite. Have you done? There being nothing eatable within his reach, Oliver replied in the affirmative. Then come with me, said Mrs. Sowerberry, taking up a dim and dirty lamp, and leading the way upstairs. Your bed's under the counter. You don't mind sleeping among the coffins, I suppose? But it doesn't much matter whether you do or don't, for you can't sleep anywhere else. Come, don't keep me here all night. Oliver lingered no longer, but meekly followed his new mistress. Chapter 5. Oliver mingles with new associates going to a funeral for the first time. He forms an unfavorable notion of his master's business. Oliver, being left to himself in the undertaker's shop, set the lamp down on a workman's bench and gazed timidly about him with the feeling of awe and dread, which many people a good deal older than he will be at no loss to understand. An unfinished coffin on black trestles, which stood in the middle of the shop, looked so gloomy and deathlike that a cold tremble came over him. Every time his eyes wandered in the direction of the dismal object, from which he almost expected to see some frightful form slowly rear its head, to drive him mad with terror. Against the wall were ranged in regular array a long row of elm boards cut in the same shape, looking in the dim light like high-shouldered ghosts with their hands in their breeches pockets. Coffin plates, elm chips, bright-headed needles, and shreds of black cloth lay scattered on the floor, and the wall behind the counter was ornamented with a lively representation of two mutes in very stiff neckcloths, on duty at a large private door with a hearse drawn by 4 black steeds, approaching in the distance. The shop was close and hot. The atmosphere seemed tainted with the smell of coffins. The recess beneath the counter in which his flock mattress was thrust looked like a grave. Nor were these the only dismal feelings which depressed Oliver. He was alone in a strange place, and we all know how he chilled and desolate the best of us will sometimes feel in a situation. The boy had no friends to care for, or to care for him. The regret of no recent separation was fresh in his mind. The absence of no loved and well-remembered face sank heavily into his heart. But his heart was heavy, notwithstanding, and he wished, as he crept into his narrow bed, that there was his coffin, and that he could be lain in a calm and lasting sleep in the churchyard ground, with the tall grass waving gently above his head, and the sound of the old deep bell to soothe him in his sleep. Oliver was awakened in the morning by a loud kicking at the outside of the shop door, which, he could huddle on his clothes, was repeated in an angry and impetuous manner about 25 times. When he began to undo the chain, the legs desisted, and a voice began. "Open the door, will you?" cried the voice, which belonged to the legs which had kicked at the door. "I will directly, sir," replied Oliver, undoing the chain and turning the key. And we'll go ahead and stop there for this week. As usual, I want to say thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Please like, comment, and subscribe, as it greatly helps the channel. Light be with you all. Take care, and thanks again.